And on the darkest day of the age, man said, "Let there be light." So was born Blaze, god of the sun, and there was light.
Hello and welcome to Pelakar. Today we're talking about the genesis of gods and pantheons in world-building situations. We'll discuss the birth of civilizations in regards to how it can spawn divinity. Later, we'll take up how new gods might be formed in an already established world. We'll keep it short, sticking to the main topics. I promise to do my very best to avoid excursions into the weeds. My name is Lewis Nichols. Being a relatively short video, I'm not even going to tell you about all the cool things I've done. You're just going to have to trust me for the next 10 minutes of your life. If I fail you, you can rip me in the comments. I look forward to it. I've had a lot of new viewers to the channel lately. Most of you aren't subscribed. I would appreciate it, if you're enjoying the video, to do so. Hit that like button and perhaps even leave a comment. That'd be pretty awesome. Also, because most of you are new, we're going to go ahead and hit a few definitions that I use that other people don't. It might help you out. The first thing is the term Velito. That is my word for lovable species. These are races like the elves, dwarves, humans, the guys that are the center of the stage, and all the weird ones too, like Kinku or Tagara. Also, we have the collective unconscious. In my game world, gods are conscious beings, though somewhat limited in free will. The unconscious can culminate into divine beings if focused by worship energy. It's also the source of XP, devotion points, or whatever mechanism is currently responsible in your world for leveling Velito. Now, what about the term god itself? It can mean different things in gaming. My gods are overwhelmingly powerful, able to control reality on a whim, especially where they hold domain and hegemony. They don't have stat blocks, and they don't follow the rules. If a god wants something dead, it just burns it to death. No immunities, no saves, just 100,000 points of fire damage and a puff of smoke. That said, I have yet to have a god interact directly with a Velito in 30-something years of gaming, and storytelling for that matter. Now on this point, or any other for that matter, you do you. If you run God Killer campaigns, I hope you're having fun, and hopefully this video will still help you. It might help you more than most, come to think about it, with all those divine job openings you seem to be having. In Pelakar, my world, the central planet, also called Pelakar, is the center of the universe. It's the prime material plane, center stage, ground zero. The reason is simple. It's the best place in the multi-universe for creating worship energy. This is the energy created when a Velito dwells on the divine. This can be a simple prayer. It could be a sacrifice. It doesn't have to even be directed at a specific deity. It could just be a hopeless cry for help. If there is a god to collect this energy, it will. If there is not, the force will cause the collective unconscious to resonate. If enough energy with similar characteristics is present in the system, a god might form. Gods of war, love, fertility, and the sea, things like that. They're usually the first ones to form early in a new age. Alright, what's with this new age business? Pelakar is cyclical. Civilization develops, maintains, and eventually falls. Usually, an age is a few thousand years, rarely more than 5,000. The beginning of an age is the point of maximum energy flow. It's like opening a dam or the sun revealing itself after a long eclipse. For a long time, there is nothing. Then BAM! However, there are a few Velito to feed the system. This creates a certain stability as the age matures. Even as the potential of individual units of worship energy wane, there is a steadily growing population, so more overall units. However, it is inevitable the flow will weaken and the age will end, usually in epic fashion. But we digress. It is the beginning of the age that we care about. What is it like at ground level when the gods become aware and realize they are strong? As the gods form, many entities of the celestial hierarchy suddenly find a purpose. These are spirits, ghosts, elementals, whatever you use to fill the gaps between Divinity and Velito. The higher ranks are recruited, but there are always plenty of candidates. Greater dragons, sphinx, high-ranking fiends, and the lingering souls of past exceptional beings, including those adventuring types. For Velito, this can be some real burning bush kind of events. Early on, you're probably talking about hunters and gatherers, at the most civilizations of thousands who are hard pressed to forge bronze or manage crop rotation. It's still possible to level, but without the gods to maintain order, the rules are out the window. Magic is uncontrollable. Obviously, divine magic is absent entirely, but it's more extreme than that. Living during one of Pelicar's dark ages means living in a world where weather is controlled strictly on the whim of local spirits. I don't want to get into it too deeply. Oh, here come those weeds again. It's not really in the realm of our topic, however, but even the basics like gravity and air pressure aren't always reliable. When spiritual energy of worship begins to flow, the gods form. With new gods come new rules, which is why, over the years, I've run multiple systems on the same world guilt-free. In one age, elves and humans can't breed any more effectively than dogs and cats. In another, we have half-elves. What about our first priest? Wimbwe is a human, a warrior of the Birch tribe. I threw a little map together and we've geolocated Wimbwe's village. It's right here. The Birch tribe fishes along this river. They hunt in the forest and try to keep to themselves. Recently, though, they had this bright idea to go into the plains and bring in some of the wild sheep who graze there. One guy thought it might even be a good idea just to kill them as they needed them. Try to keep the rest handy for later. Maybe even let them have a few babies. A true revolutionary thinker. It didn't exactly work out as planned. Come to find out, the Jord clan claimed those lands for themselves, and the sheep who grazed them. What a crazy notion, that you could just claim the land. It was over the next year that Wimbwe became a local hero. He wasn't always the star of the battlefield show, but he was always among the standouts. He was lucky enough to survive, and he learned. It was his idea to conduct the very first false retreat in the history of the New Age. That little stunt won the war. Then one day, he met Rupert. It was a spirit wolf. Kinda scary at first. That old canine was the biggest he'd ever seen, and it snarled like the devil. Wimbwe was certain he was about to die, but decided to take it like a champ. He bowed up on that wolf and snarled back. This seemed to satisfy Rupert, as he put away his teeth. You have a destiny. Woof! Wimbwe had never spoken to an animal before, but suddenly Rupert was spewing facts about the nature of war and the cosmos. Suddenly, he was a priest to the god of war himself. A lot of people didn't believe what happened, but the local hero showed off some of his new healing abilities and the power to cast Bless. It became apparent he had ascended to something special. Wimbwe wasn't the only one to get a visit that year. The tribe's best fisherman became a priest of the river god. A woman that everyone previously thought was a little crazy got selected by the god of magic. Temples were built, miracles performed, and the town of the Birch became the religious center of an early empire. If you want to run first-generation magic, feel free to change things up. You are totally justified in restricting spells in power, number available, or both. Abilities might be lacking as well. On the other hand, those first few priests and priestesses are the vanguards of enlightenment. No priest will ever be closer to their gods than these guys. I would still not have them directly interacting with the deities themselves, but they will probably encounter and converse with beings that will become legendary later. Wimbwe only got access to 3 first-level spells, but he once summoned a pack of 500 wolves just because he could call directly on the god of war's favor. In a not-so-numbers-oriented way, Wimbwe had even more power. Remember, gods are formed by the ideas of the worshippers who empower them. A god of war owes his existence to the observations of a people forced into conflict. If Wimbwe was the vengeful type, that might just influence the god himself. Has our hero grown wild with battle lust? Does he forever crave the next conflict? Or is he a veteran, dedicated to preparing the next generation for a war he hopes never comes? Those thoughts and feelings will be reflected in his sermons. His sermons will shape the faith of his flock, and it's their prayers that coalesce the collective unconscious into something permanent. The birch have influenced the creation of a god, but now he will define those who follow him for thousands of years, beyond bronze spears to steel halberds, past conflicts between dozens onto battlefields where thousands lie dead at the end of the day. What about pantheons? Normal is a pantheon of 5 to 10 who share some common origin stories. For 5e, they'll all have a couple domains, and that will cover most, if not all, of the potential cleric subclasses. As a side note, I would determine this kind of lore early, especially if you're restricting your player's options. If you're not, then you can always accommodate new ideas via retcons, or just make it happen. The birch have 5 gods in their pantheon: war, river, agriculture, magic, and the sky. They are a pantheon because they share common ecclesiastical roots. They are all worshipped by the same people groups. Their religious practices will all be similar as they were mutually adopted by the same culture group. They may even share institutions and holy days. You can world build all the cool stuff at your leisure. I personally encourage you to take the unique nature of pantheons as far as you would like. In Pelakar, priests of different religions might as well be different classes. The Kelds are warrior priests with limited spells but abilities that match their church's role in the culture. Meanwhile, the Larraquesh pantheon is far more focused on spells, offering a vast array of utility, offense, and defense. Balance is important in 5e, but clerics are always kind of underpowered anyway. If you want to do this sort of thing, I'd say pick something minor but noticeable. I'm giving one of my pantheons an added functionality with some of their spells through the use of a ceremonial staff. It's not something big, but it is an add-on power to a class that's highly underplayed. If you are gaming this out in a campaign setting, your PCs can have a great deal of agency here. They will influence all these decisions and will be a major part in the evolution of religion and cultural values at their locality. I would not run this sort of thing if your players are not on board with being major leaders in their community. PCs have a tendency to dominate anyway, and early in an age, there really isn't any competition. Realistically, I really don't see this stuff we're talking about lasting more than a couple generations, roughly 40 years. By the time third-generation priests are embarking on their adventuring careers, the rules of the age are pretty well set in stone. Another 40 years and interactions with powerful holy beings are pretty much a thing of the past. This early time period will become known as the Age of Heroes, even if those modern adventurers will actually be a lot more powerful. Speaking of the past, it doesn't have to be written in stone, as you might think. This is a magical world where the laws of physics are fluid and anything imaginable can become possible. Taking a last look at Wimbwe, he had to explain the birch gods hundreds of times over his long life. Eventually, he found it easiest to describe them as the progenitors of the birch people. He described the gods as a family. Sky was a male figure, with agriculture and magic as his faithful wives. War took on the role of a powerful elder in the shadows, but always ready to step into the scene as required. River was the wild card of the family, an estranged cousin to Sky, who was often dependable, but occasionally unpredictable and even treacherous. Wimbwe knew this was not exactly accurate as he remembered, but by the time he died, it was canon, and no one knew to question it. By the way, once you've done this little bit of backbuilding, you've added substantial pieces of the culture and theology to your world. Hey, what about that word we used earlier? Hegemony. The social, cultural, ideological, or economic influence exerted by a dominant group. Thank you, Mr. Webster, but I also use this word to mean something else. Question for you: what happens when one weather god wants it to rain and the other doesn't? For me, these things are usually handled by negotiations way up in the celestial hierarchy. Borders and areas of influence are tediously determined because you ain't seen a war until you've seen a holy war. Now, we like conflict, so usually the realms of gods over man do dangerously overlap. For the most part, this is handled by low-level disputes or actual violence between spirits or even Velito. It can be pretty tough on those spirits. Often they serve more than one god, but they are pretty good at playing the political game and keeping the world working. There is a state, however, when gods, usually the whole pantheon, does have an absolute say over the region, and that's hegemony. Usually this happens when the percentage of Alito worshipping in that religion exceeds 80%. Priests of other pantheons are still allowed, usually. If you're familiar with Dresden's Tale on this channel, there are obvious exceptions. Anyways, priests are normally allowed and can function as usual. There won't be open temples, but there might be some compounds or diplomatic missions. If you do god calls in your campaigns, well, that's just not going to happen. Divination magic might even be sketchy. You might have noticed the gods I've mentioned are about as bread and butter as it gets. In primitive cultures, that's what you end up with. Of course, there can be more: the hunt, weather, trade, medicine, knowledge, and so forth. But what about more interesting gods, like Earl, the god of tea, Bosno, god of entertainers, and Vivian, patron goddess of beauty? There is a lot of room for gods in an advanced fantasy culture that probably wouldn't fire from the collective unconscious back when cavemen were pushing the buttons. The genesis of such beings can be part of a story arc where the PCs are actively involved, or it could be something happening in the background. Maybe it could be a challenge for a player with a character wanting to be a cleric to a church who doesn't yet have a god. For me, this kind of quest might occupy a space and time just a few hundred years after the beginning of an age. The dark times are not yet a lost memory. There are still unexplored and unoccupied spots on the map, but also many centers of population charging headlong into the age of high fantasy. That's the cool thing about the game that we love. It can be Conan or Excalibur, or it can be more like Blade Runner, but with magic instead of tech. Make your world what you want it to be. I'm just here to inspire your own creativity. I want to thank you all for stopping by. I did enjoy our time together. You are all important. You all matter. If you have a moment, please hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. I mean, you got this far into the video. You should have gotten some enjoyment out of it, right? Finally, don't forget to watch our community polls. I was going to do this episode eventually, but a subscriber voted, so it got bumped way up in the queue. Whether you participate or not, I'm glad you stopped by. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Cheers.